In this episode of Wizards of the Tower Roleplay, to roll or not to roll? That is the question. In this episode of Wizards of the Tower Roleplay, to roll or not to roll? That is the question.
On Wizards of the Tower Roleplay.
I'm Delaney,
And I'm Tom.
and we're here to talk to you about everything role-playing, tabletop, computer RPGs, and possibly other games that deal with tabletop.
Yeah.
So, we're here to talk about to roll or not to roll. Now, what do I mean by roll or not to roll?
Well, ROLE, meaning take up a role of a character, the role you play in the game, or roll, essentially, to roll your dice. ROLL.
Look at that, on that one.
Excellent. Fumble.
Fumble.
So, the whole idea of role playing, and you take on the role of a character that you create. All right. Now, what have been like some of the best role playing scenarios we've had in our games? We've had a lot of games that we've played, but we've had people who absolutely, positively refuse to role play at all, and I mean ROLE. They will not role play.
Yeah.
We've had some who do a great job.
Yeah, let's take the character who's got the 8 charisma
Okay.
versus they go into, versus another party member who may have a 13 or 14 or 15 or whatever charisma. And that person is such a domineering person that they dominate the game and they try to talk their way into and out of situations with an 8 charisma.
Usually doesn't work.
It shouldn't work.
Shouldn't work. Not everyone is comfortable role playing. Okay, it's pretty obvious. You have to have your inner actor has to come out. That character you used to have when you were a kid and you were in the talent show, or you had the garage band and you liked to sing and play in front of people, that sort of thing. So you have to pick up a character, and we've had some really good people who've done interesting voices, different sort of mannerisms, and things like that. I like to do kind of interesting voices, and that's just kind of how I am. That's one of the benefits of a lonely childhood, being raised on a ranch in the upper Midwest, where I was essentially my own best friend. So, challenge me on a voice. Give me any kind of example you like.
Let's see. Do the sorcerer that you had, it was a fire-based sorcerer.
No, my friend, this is not personal, but I'm going to burn you. I'm going to torture you until you tell me what I want you to know. Until you tell me what I need to know. There's nothing personal in this, my friend, but I'm going to torture you. Hopefully I won't torture you until you die. But I am. Stand by, my friend. I'm going to burn you.
What about the character from Aces and Eights?
Well, he was a Native American, and he spoke slowly and measured because English was not his first language. Sometimes his inflections were not quite correct, but he spoke very measured and evenly spaced words in the English language.
Now, the one that everyone tends to do, the dwarf.
Oi, laddie, there'd be the Scottish language there for dwarfs. We don't know why, but it's a wee bit of an accent that they always put on the dwarfs, and I blame the Hobbit and Lord of the Rings for that one.
And not that when you roleplay, you have to come up with a voice.
You don't. But it's fun. It's fun. It's that inner actor that you have, that you get, and you can differentiate your character from everyone else's by a different sort of mannerism or a different voice or something of that sort.
And like I said, you don't have to do the voices. It's kind of your choice. But when it comes to role playing, people think a lot of when you say role playing, is it's not the ROLE, it's the rolling of dice. You know, that they think that, well, my character's got X amount of diplomacy, that if I roll the dice, then I should get through it. I, as a DM, don't necessarily do it that way. I will reward a player a bonus if they role play particularly well. If they go in to do a trial, or and a great example of this, we had one game that was the Carrying Crown adventure path, where one of our players had to defend the Frankenstein monster, prove he was innocent.
Yep.
And I actually made him roleplay, and he did such a fantastic job. It was probably one of the best role-playing that I have ever seen as a DM in my life. And at the end of it, I said, okay, give me a die roll, and whatever he got, I said, you're getting a bonus on this because you role-played so well. And it was better than taking a 20.
Yeah. The scenario was a courtroom scenario. He had to play defense attorney for a monster that had been accused of starting a fire in a hospice and killing a bunch of people in there. Everyone assumed, because the monster was a monster, it had to be evil.
Flesh golem.
A flesh golem. Otherwise, kind of like a Frankenstein's monster, Dr. Frankenstein's monster. And because they assumed that because he was a monster, he had to be evil, he was made out to be the scapegoat. So we had one character, we had one player in our group whose character took it upon himself. He was a paladin, I think, wasn't he?
No, he was. I think he might have been a cleric or a rogue. I think he might have been a rogue. I think is what he was.
Well, he took it upon himself. He had a high charisma, anyway, I remember, and a high diplomacy. He took it upon himself to defend this monster in a court of law, suppose that Delaney created within the game.
It was actually part of the adventure.
And he assumed the role of the defense attorney, and he did a successful argument. Stood up in front of all of us around the table, and like Atticus Finch in To Kill a Mockingbird, he did a great job. And it was the greatest role-playing I've ever seen, to be honest. Most people just sit there and mumble or fumble around and don't do a darn thing. He really took that role onto himself, and I gotta say, that's what role playing is about.
Yeah, we have in our current group, we've got a young lady who's actually playing two characters.
Yeah,
and instead of doing two voices, she actually has this piece of paper with the names, and we've joked about getting her a placard mask.
Yeah,
one face on the other,
like
and she can
one
hold
face, turn it around, a different face, turn it around, the face, exactly.
And she role plays rather well.
She does.
Playing the two characters.
She does.
It's quite entertaining because one of her characters is a barbarian who rages, who's got quite the attitude, and the other one's a dwarf that her one of the other players that she knew that came in with her was playing, and he couldn't play any longer, so she picked it up and played the character. But instead of rolling the dice, she role plays.
Exactly.
And I really encourage all of my players to role play and not just always roll the dice.
So one of the things that I think is so good about Pathfinder and role-playing games in general is you should be able to talk your way in or out of a situation. If you have a high enough diplomacy, if you have a high enough charisma, you should be able to avoid combat by talking your way into the guard's house instead of fighting your way into the guard's house. There was one game we played, and I had a character with a very, very high diplomacy. He disguised himself as like a wanderer, and he went into an orc camp, and he went to the commander of the orc army. Now, keep in mind, this is a commander, and there are probably like 50 orcs, and we were all getting ready to essentially, gird up with magic weapons and everything. We're going to take on this whole orc army, and I had my character step in. I said, okay, wait, just let me try something first. I went into the camp. I went to the orc commander. I handed him a message, and I said, General, urgent news. Your mother is ill. She's calling for you. She's on her deathbed. You've got to go right now. I rolled. I think I rolled a 27 diplomacy.
20 plus.
Yeah, way 20 plus. And because his save was not particularly high, the general dropped everything, grabbed some of his men, and split back home. And with him gone, the rest of the orcs just kind of broke up and went their own way, and we didn't have to fight. See, that's the thing that you can do in a game. Instead of making the game just constant combat, where you're just hacking and slashing your way down these stairs, up those stairs, across the street, across this field, you can talk your way, you can think your way in and out of a scenario.
Well, then you get the players who may have a really low intelligence, and then they're out there solving the puzzle.
No.
You know, and
you've got to be authentic, and we'll talk about playing your character authentically in another episode. But you've got to be authentic. That's how you play your character.
Well, there was, you know, I mentioned it in I think it was the first episode, Ogron Org Fangtooth.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he was brilliant for a half ogre, but you know, he walked around and talked, oh, the ogre, you know,
well, is it ogre?
I'm strong, you know, and he didn't play it smart.
Yeah.
And in fact, in that adventure, I remember we walked into this room and there was this gold vase, and there were flowers and other simple things on it, and some party members had gone up with their daggers and tried to chip it off, and their daggers had stuck to it, and they couldn't break them loose. In fact, I think some of the daggers even broke when they tried to. And Org didn't know anything. He took one of the coins that he had, and he went and put it up on top of it. And the DM passed me a note, and the note said, "You now have an intelligence of 16." And Org he started shaking his head, and he went and sat in the corner and put his head in his hand and just sat there. And one of the players walked over and said, "Org, what's wrong?" And Org says, "Well, I'm not really sure." And the party's like, "Wait a minute, you're talking differently now." Because as the way the DM said, you know, is his intelligence improved and he can talk intelligently, and
all of a sudden he's smarter than he used to be.
You know, a lot smarter than he used to be. And so, you know, there's that side of role playing.
Yeah.
You know, whether it be your strength, your dex, your con, your charisma, intelligence, wisdom, whatever. There was the other character I had that I talked about that had a quirk of she didn't like non-humans.
Oh,
and
yeah,
as the adventure went on and she learned the value of non-humans, you know, I lessened what I was doing in the game. So there's that side of role playing instead of picking up the dice and rolling the dice.
Now, a lot of the games that you see, and especially the ones that are demonstrated online a lot of times, you have the DM essentially guiding everyone as they go down, you know, through the tunnel, through the stairwell into the haunted castle or whatever. And the DM is, you know, that's essentially there to force the action along because there's a time constraint. A lot of people sit down around a table. They want to game for a couple hours and go watch football or whatever. They're not willing to invest the amount of time it takes to actually set up this really complex scenario and interact with everybody around the table. So the actual role play there in a game like that is actually pretty limited. You don't actually get to inhabit your characters and come up and say, well, I'm going to talk my way out of this scenario, you know, with these guards. And they're always like, okay, roll it. And it's like, well, don't you want me to actually role play it out? Like, you know, walk down the steps and say, yeah, Commander Various, well, remember me? We went to cadet school together, and you know, it's cold out here. Can't I come in and sit by your fire, and we'll talk about old times? And Various says, well, I don't really remember you, old man, but you're welcome to come in and sit by our fire. Well, thank you. I'll come in and have some wine, and I even brought some cheese with me, and we'll talk about old times. And while I'm in there, I'll get to spy out how many guards are in here from my group, and then we'll know, you know, how many guards we have to take out. Ha ha ha! That sort of thing. Where's the room for that in the games where the DM just basically tells you what's happening and what you should do?
Yeah,
that's the whole point of role playing. Role play out the scenario. Oh, you want to buy a horse? Role play it out and see what kind of deal you get.
Yeah. Well, it's the whole aspect of role playing games. You watch the Max Vox Machina or some of those, you know, and you've got paid actors that are doing this.
Yeah.
And none of us are paid actors. Now, some of us might be aspiring to be actors or musicians. But it's fun to me to take on that role, whether I do a voice or not to do a voice.
Now, folks, we're not ripping anybody in that scenario. It's how you want to play. That's great. Whatever works for you, whatever your gig is, however you can make it work, fine. Okay. But they didn't spend all this time writing these books, okay, just to have you sit there like a bump on a log while someone lectures you about where you're going in the game. This stuff is all created so that you inhabit a character and you voice that character and you create those unique character interactions within your group in the gaming scenario. That's
Right.
what it's all about. That's my opinion.
And having laughs. That's
Yes.
part of the role playing.
Exactly. Having fun doing it.
The camaraderie.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we're going to end that episode of Wizards of the Tower Roleplay. May all your adventures be epic and keep on rolling.
Thanks, folks.